All right, we are officially live after a couple of distractions. I was actually hello and welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel for our second part of our weekend Q&A. This is a jog and then looked at the clock and it was 1:10 and I knew I had to jump on. So this is our second part of our weekly Q&A. We do this every Saturday at 6 o'clock and Sundays at 4 o'clock. And I've got a few topics I'd like to talk to you all about today. Remember, if you like and subscribe, we're trying to grow the channel, hit 5,000 subscribers. Now the goal is by the end of the month, because we're at like 4980. Like 70 people subscribed yesterday. We had such a great live stream. It was one of the best we've ever had. So I really appreciate all of it and the love and the questions. But if you have something you want to talk about, Bill, if you have something you want to talk about, social science related, history related, drop it in the chat and I will get to it at an appropriate time. But yeah, we are here every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, or in this case 4:14 Eastern, which I think is midnight London, or 10 o'clock London time, something like that. So anyways, got a few topics I want to address. I only got to a couple of them yesterday because there were a lot of people asking a lot of questions, but I know where those people went. They probably all went to watch football today, which is perfectly okay. I wish I was watching football too, but when given the choice between history and football, I'll take the history. So anyways, what did I want to talk about? So a few of our topics today include a discussion of the background of Indigenous Peoples Day, the reason for Indigenous Peoples Day, why I think Indigenous Peoples Day should be a longer celebration. I'm going to talk about the creation of Prussia and how the modern German state emerged and how it's all kind of Poland's fault. So I think you might find that interesting. And we will also be discussing the British and how they possibly lost the American Revolution to a ragtag group of American forces. It's all a lot of fun stuff that I hope you really, really enjoy. So just give me a minute here. Walking into the house. Anyway, so, oh no. Uh-oh, my connection's going bad. Anyways, let's see here. It's like a nice day out, so I just figured a jog would be perfect, get me in the right state of mind, and then I'm like, did I go too far? That's always a challenge when you're jogging and you're going to do a live stream. Do you go too far with the jog and all of that? And sometimes you really, really do. It's just kind of bizarre. So anyways, welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. This is our weekly Q&A, and the reason I'm out of breath is I just went on a jog, so give me 1 second. 3 topics, but you guys get to ask about anything that you would like to ask about. And here's a really good question from my wonderful moderator, Simon, who is asking, how did the cultural and scientific advancements during the Islamic Golden Age influence European thought in the Renaissance? We will be talking about that too. That was one of the topics I wanted to get to. A lot of people don't know about the Islamic Golden Age. They don't know about Islam in the... we're back on the internet. My trusty 2 double lamps that I finally got fixed. Hello everyone, welcome. So, Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, our weekly Q&A. Ask me anything history related, social science related. How has the world been for the last 65 million years? It's been okay. A lot of surprises since you guys got wiped out. Sorry about that, by the way, but not our fault. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, and this is our weekly Q&A where we talk about social science related stuff, social studies, history, and you guys get to bring up any topics you want, any questions you have, and I will get to that in the chat. I've got a few topics I wanted to discuss. Yesterday we had a huge showing. We had a lot of people. It was a lot of fun, and I really, really appreciated that and all the support. We picked up a bunch of subscribers, and if you want to become a Friendly Neighborhood Historian, it's as easy as liking and subscribing. You will be one of nearly 5,000 Friendly Neighborhood Historians. I'm not the Friendly Neighborhood Historian, but if you like and subscribe, you are automatically a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. And you'll excuse me for my shortness of breath and my moving around and my sweatiness. I was doing a jog, got lost track on the track of time, and now we're starting a little bit late, but you guys got to see me walk a little bit. You got to see some nice nature, so I hope you all enjoyed that. But let's get down to the business. Wow, it's 1 a.m. Where are you for it to be 1 a.m.? Because it's 4 p.m. on the East Coast in the United States right now. Oh, now I am one. Oh, you were asking. I thought you said now it's 1 a.m. Sorry, my bad. Thank you for subscribing, Nebula. I really appreciate that. And Nebula, you are part of the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. We also have our pinned quote there. Name a name for an edit. I don't know, Stefan. There you go. I've got some good questions here. So Simon was asking about the Islamic Revolution. I'll talk about that, and then I'm going to get to your question, Daniel. That's what I do every weekend, every Saturday at 6 p.m. and Sunday at 4 p.m. Yesterday, there were so many questions and so much great feedback. We went for an hour and 40 minutes, 100 minutes. It was our record. We usually only go for an hour, and today we're only going to go for about an hour, a little after 2 o'clock. We'll wrap it up. But anyways, Simon the Bunny was asking, how did the cultural and scientific advancements during the Islamic Golden Age influence European thought in the Renaissance? So basically, the Islamic Golden Age is fueled by two things. One, an Islamic interest in understanding the world that Allah created. So in its first century, Islam came like a bat out of hell, out of the Arabian Peninsula, and was able to successfully conquer all of North Africa, all of Palestine, all of Anatolia and Turkey, and they were also able to capture Spain. Their century of conquest was only stalled when they were defeated at the Battle of Tours by Charles Martel, who was the grandfather of Charlemagne, and the father of the first king of France, Pepin the Short. So they were stopped in 732, but they had already conquered Spain, North Africa, the Middle East. They had destroyed the Sassanid Persians, something the Roman Empire couldn't even do, and they had really hurt the Byzantines, the Eastern Roman Empire, significantly. And with stabilized borders, wealthy amounts of trade, copious amounts of work, they had access to all sorts of ancient manuscripts in the Middle East, in the Fertile Crescent, in the area around Israel. They had access to all the holy sites of Judaism and Christianity, as well as their own holy sites. And a huge emphasis was placed on learning about and glorifying the world Allah created, and honoring the Prophet Muhammad by doing this. So if you look at, this is where Islamic art, beautiful tapestries, the architecture, the minarets, there's a huge focus and emphasis on geometric patterns and shapes in Islamic art, mainly because in Islam, showing the continuity, beauty, and unity of Allah's world was a huge factor for these people. So throughout the Muslim Golden Age, a lot of these people were artists, mathematicians, scientists, were focused on studying the world that Allah had created, and glorifying him through their studies. And that's what they were able to do by getting involved in different projects. You have the creation of algebra by Al-Khwarizmi, and he's one example of many different Islamic scholars. There's a lot of scientific advancements. There's a lot of cultural exchange. There's a lot of trade. There's a lot of religious toleration. So basically, the Umayyad, and then it's known as the Abbasid Caliphate, were these two Islamic states, really Islamic empires that were really strong, really impossible to defeat, and were extremely invested in studying the arts, literature. They copied down ancient manuscripts, philosophy, religion, religious texts were preserved. Ancient knowledge from the classical period was preserved and copied down by Muslims in the Middle East during this time. And although they destroyed the Library of Alexander, which held many great works of antiquity in Egypt, they continued to reproduce, copy down, and preserve ancient works of art and philosophy, science, and religion for centuries. And so when the Crusades happened and Christian soldiers came from Europe and fought with the Muslims, oftentimes, as part of their spoils, they would bring back all sorts of different collections of manuscripts, of documents, maps, studies. So the works that the Muslims had created became part of the spoils, the riches that the Crusaders would bring back with them from the Middle East. And this inspired Renaissance learning and things like that. So all of a sudden, these works that were copied down from antiquity, such as Aristotle, were very popular in the Islamic world, and were eventually kind of captured and taken back to Europe by the medieval Crusaders. For instance, a very well-known Islamic scholar named Averroes spent a huge amount of time studying the works of Aristotle and copying them down, and his commentaries and his ideas became popular in the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance as European scholars sought to study the philosophy of the ancient Greeks, and one way they could get the manuscripts and the commentaries and the editions were from these treasure troves of manuscripts and documents brought back from the Middle East by the Crusaders. So it was actually the Crusades and also the Islamic interest in learning about Allah's world that eventually led to the development of Renaissance thinking. So there's just some things there. So I've gotten a bunch of people in the chat, but Simon, I hope that answers your question. If you're just joining us, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday when you could be watching football or doing any number of things. I really, really appreciate it. and I'm putting down the remote, not watching any football because I want to be here. We are here every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern and Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. If you look at the tagged post down in the comments, if you subscribe, you are automatically a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that to join the channel and join the movement. We're trying to get to 5,000 now by the end of the month, 6,000 by the end of the year. I've got some lofty goals because 6,000 is the number of a Roman legion, and I want to say I have a legion of followers, or at least there's a legion of friendly neighborhood historians. So Daniel was asking, what's your favorite piece of history you've ever learned? Oh boy, it's tough because there's just so much fascinating history that there's all sorts of different polemical history that I've really learned. Like I've learned about different arguments and different historiographical perspectives. I would say when it comes to the favorite piece of history I've ever learned, I think that Russia is my particular focus and aim. So learning more details about about the Russian Revolution and the rise of Bolshevism and then communism and the Soviet Union and the Russian Civil War, those kind of all mixed together to be my favorite types of history that I've ever learned. I love every type of history. I always find it fascinating to learn more about the human condition and learn more about ideas because that's what history is about, the human condition and ideas. But Russian, Eastern European history, it's where my emphasis is, it's where my studies are. So that's been really important, especially in the 19th and 20th century. So, okay, let's see. So thank you, Daniel, for that really great question. And that's what we're here for. This is a Q&A. You ask a question, drop it in the chat, and I will get to it at an appropriate time. A topic you want to discuss, social science related, social studies related, history related, I'm here for that purpose, and we're going to be here for another 40 minutes at least. So, yeah. Oh, wow. Hello. Welcome from Brazil and from Finland. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us from Finland. If you're still here, Sine, that's really awesome. UK, so we've got people from England, we've got people from Finland, we've got people from, I just love having people from all over the world. And normally what happens is people will ask, tell me more about my country and its history. And I think they expect, because they think I'm an American, that I'm not going to know anything. And sometimes they are surprised. Sometimes I don't know as much as I would like to know. And they tell me about things, and that's really very helpful. And yes, I am the friendly neighborhood historian. I do not give out I am not technically the friendly neighborhood historian. That's you guys. I don't give out my personal information and stuff like that. You guys can ask and guess, but yeah. You want to visit South Carolina? Very fascinating place. With the palm tree on its flag. Was originally part of North Carolina, then divided up and was settled by a huge number of French Protestants escaping persecution from the Catholics in the late 17th century. So, I don't know that flag off the top of my head, but thank you for joining us, Abba Samad. Thank you for subscribing, Indian. I really appreciate that. I try to be as nice as possible. I try to bring you guys interesting content, and you guys are really interesting. Thank you for the subscription. I really appreciate it. Talk about how Islam views women. So, Davis, there's a lot of stereotypes, and some of it is justifiable because you have radical Islam, Wahhabism, which emerges in Saudi Arabia before in the Arabian Peninsula during the late 19th century, and with the development of the Saud family taking control of Arabia in the 1920s and 30s, 40s, you have this development of this radical imposition of Sharia law. You also have it in Iran after the Iranian Revolution and the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini, who basically uses students, liberals, moderate Muslims, and communists, and basically uses them so that he can take power, overthrow the Shah, cut off ties to the West, and make Iran a radical Islamic state. And basically, so you have the implementation of Sharia law, and that's where you get burqas and hijabs and things like this, and restrictions on women, everything from female genital mutilation to mercy killings, things like that. So these restrictions are not necessarily a complete and contiguous element of Islamic history, but they are more modern in many of the modern Islamic states that have emerged. And there is some history of that happening as well. And Muhammad himself had a very checkered relationship with women. He believed falsely that the Christian Trinity was Jesus, God the Father, and the Virgin Mary. It was based on a Christian heresy that was popular in Arabia at that time that isn't actually the Christian belief. He also married she was 9, and he consummated the relationship when she was 13. Not uncommon in that time of the world. He's not the only one to do it. Obviously, if you look at Christianity, the Virgin Mary was only 13 or 14 when she was pregnant with Jesus. So there's a lot of this in different religions. Many women at that time period throughout the ancient and medieval world, especially in the Middle East, when they were able to menstruate, they were able to be married. And so you had girls 13, 14 years old marrying and having children. And well below our modern conceptions of consent. So that's not a unique thing with Muhammad, but it's not necessarily a great thing. So there's some checkered history there. There is a lot of very fascinating stories of Islamic women throughout history. One example I think of is the wife of Shah Jahan, the Mughal Muslim emperor of India, who built the Taj Mahal in honor of his wife as a tomb for her, and built it in the Islamic style. So there are Islamic leaders and throughout history, and there's Islamic honoring of women in different cultures and societies. So very interesting question there, Davis. I can't. There's the modern views of women. There's ancient views of women, and there's this. It's not the same. Islam has been extraordinarily tolerant in some of the places it's been in the world, such as West Africa, the Indonesia, and other places, and it has been less tolerant at other iterations. So. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Which Roman Empire was very beneficial for the Roman Empire? That's a great one, Soviet. I really, really appreciate that question. So I think when you think of the top 10 Roman emperors, and I found this video a couple weeks ago that was just absolutely horrid, so I edited it and did my own version of a top 10 Roman emperors. But if I'm correct, I'm trying to think exactly who's in there. But Constantine's one, Augustus, Trajan, Hadrian, all really beneficial. Augustus obviously creates the imperial system. He rules the longest of any Roman emperor, and he lives until his late 70s. He's an extremely successful emperor. You also have Trajan, who is maybe the best conquering Roman emperor, who expands the territory of Rome to its greatest extent and is extraordinarily successful in running the government and keeping the Senate happy. And Rome is at its most prosperous, its most extensive, and probably its most powerful under Trajan. Then you have Hadrian, who I call the Great Builder. He builds the Pantheon. He reinforces the Roman borders. He builds Hadrian's Wall that basically becomes a land barrier separating England and Scotland because the Romans could never conquer Scotland, what they called Caledonia. You've got Constantine, and Diocletian, who in the 4th century, after a century of chaos and decline for the Roman Empire, they stabilize the empire. They create new systems of government and organization. Constantine perhaps creates the Eastern Roman Empire by building Constantinople, a new capital for the Romans. Of course, he sees the growing influence of Christianity in the empire, and he decides to make it a legal religion rather than persecuting the largest growing population in the Roman Empire. He instead starts to pander to them. So guys like that are very beneficial. Diocletian and Constantine keep the empire going. Diocletian reorganized the central bureaucracy, the civil service. He divides the empire up so that it's easier to govern and power is more centralized. And then Constantine is an extremely great warrior. Marcus Aurelius is not only a great philosopher, but he's also able to keep the empire's borders secure and fight off the barbarians basically every step of the way. So those are the great emperors. A lot of them had monetary crises, did not know how inflation and currency worked, except for one, and he gets a bad rap because he was kind of on the more paranoid side, and that's Diocletian. Diocletian actually solved the money crisis by purifying the money rather than debasing it, and by raising taxes. So Diocletian was one of the more successful Roman emperors that you don't know about. Another underrated Roman emperor is Claudius, who actually today, I do a daily rest in peace video about historical figures who passed away, and Claudius passed away on this day in 54 AD when he was poisoned by his wife, who was also his niece, because yeah, they were freaky back then. She poisoned him with mushrooms, which he took, some say willingly, dies, and then his son, Nero, becomes the emperor. Or his adopted son, her son Nero. So she poisoned him. But Claudius is a very underrated emperor. A lot of people thought he was a weak, feeble, stupid old man. He had a stammer. He had a limp. He might have very well had cerebral palsy, but he actually turned out to be an extremely effective emperor. He conquered England. He's the reason that Britain was controlled by the Romans for 3.5 centuries. He reformed the government. He set up new building projects, and he ruled over Rome during one of its golden eras. So there's an extremely underrated Roman emperor who was really beneficial for the empire. So anyways, yeah. Shashank is asking, what is your nationality? My nationality is obviously, as many people can tell, is American. I don't reveal much more than that. Thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate that. I have not watched that, John. I don't know what that is. Ask anything you want. Thanks, Robert. I don't know if that's true. We are And like Simon is pointing out, we are 20 subscribers away from 5,000. We're trying to hit 5,000. Heck, I was going to say by the end of the month, maybe by the end of today. If you like and subscribe, if you enjoy learning about social studies and history, join the channel, become a friendly neighborhood historian. It really helps the channel grow. I talk about social sciences. I've got a short series video about a series of short videos right now on powerful women. I do daily history videos like what happened on this day in history. I do daily biographies, who was born on this day. I do daily rest in peace videos like I just talked about with Claudius. I do historical myths. Did you know things people don't know about history? History fast facts called 5 and 15, where I talk really fast. So if you like listening to Ben Shapiro or someone like that, you might enjoy watching those videos. And I'm doing longer form content. For instance, tomorrow I'm dropping a longer form content video discussing Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day, why people celebrate both, and what are the origins of those holidays and reasons for celebrating them. So that's a longer length video. I'm trying to do more of that, but I mainly do shorts, 15 seconds, 60 seconds, stuff like that. Anyways, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Shashank is asking, what's the direction of flow in the U.S. elections? So are you asking like momentum and stuff? So I do weekly political videos. I haven't done mine for this week. There wasn't that much in politics this week, other than Vice President Harris sat down for a huge interview with CBS in 60 Minutes, which former President Trump dodged. Right now, if you look at it closely, and I look at it semi-closely, it looks like, despite the fact that it's pretty much a toss-up and a lot of people think that they don't know who's going to win, and Harris has ran a very formidable campaign, that Trump might have a little bit of the momentum and a little bit of the edge. So who knows there? If I had to guess, if I had to put money on it, I'd say he's probably going to win right now, but that could easily change. There's still 3 weeks, which is an eternity in politics. Daniel has a great question. What movies have your approval for historical accuracy, if any? A lot of movies have no historical accuracy whatsoever. I was just talking with people about Titanic and how it's not accurate at all historically, and how it's also other than the fact that it has amazing CGI and graphics and cinematography, it's not that good of a movie. The acting is not good, and there's plenty of plot holes. And he could have totally survived with her on that platform, but he didn't have to do it because he's pretty and he has to die. Got it. But anyways, rant over. You take a look at the movie like Braveheart. I thought all my life that William Wallace was Braveheart because of that movie. No, it's Robert the Bruce who is the Braveheart. And maybe the movie is implying that by showing his treachery, but there was no treachery. Wallace only fought against Longshanks once, and Edward Longshanks always defeated the English. He died 3 years after Wallace was killed. He was actually the one who oversaw the execution, not Edward II. And Edward II's homosexuality was rumored but not proven. So Braveheart's a beautiful movie. It's a wonderful movie, and there's a lot of accuracy. And how accurate can you get? But it's not hugely accurate. There are some other movies that are... The Patriot, obviously, is another example. Mel Gibson loves to make these movies, and they're semi-historically accurate, but there's a lot of embellishment, obviously. You have a few characters changing kind of their identity, but it's a fairly decent adaptation of the American Revolution. Tombstone is not an accurate depiction of the American Wild West and what happened between the Earps and the Claytons. But I'd say those movies do have my approval. They're great movies. They get people involved in history, and they help them learn, even if some elements are fictional. I'm trying to think of what other movies. Lincoln is an extraordinarily accurate historical movie that has my approval. Definitely. I need to see Napoleon. I need to see Hacksaw Ridge, and I need to see Tubman. I want to see all of those, and I can tell you a little bit more about those. Free State of Jones, I didn't know anything about that, but that brought history to an extremely important thing. So that's an accurate one. So, yeah. Those are just a few of the ones that come to mind, and I'll probably think of others later and just randomly blurt them out because that's kind of strange. But anyways, Im is asking, I'm failing U.S. history. I have an F. Can you help? Yes, I can help. Ask me what you need to learn about, and I'll tell you. Yeah. 10 subscribers away. So we are building. I really appreciate that. Thank you for keeping track, Simon. Let's see. Cyrillic, I can't read that. If you translate that, I'll be able to answer that. Can you explain Night of the Long Knives? Ooh, that's a great question. Oliver, thank you so much for that question. The Night of the Long Knives is basically the way that Hitler, like Stalin, like many other dictators, purged his own party so that he proved they were always loyal to him. So basically, the Nazi leadership was extraordinarily loyal to Hitler, but Hitler was worried that if he did not make sure they were loyal, they might start to drift away. So Mao did this in China, Stalin did this in Russia, dictators do this all the time. Hitler was worried about the popularity of Ernst Röhm, the head of the SA. Roon was was his second in command. He was his lieutenant. He was his right hand man. Roon. So Hitler decided that Roon was a threat to him. Was he an existential threat to Hitler's power and prestige? Probably not. But in order to consolidate his power, he had just taken over as both German chancellor and he was about to become the German president. He was well on his way to being Fuhrer. He had the enabling acts that gave him the power he wanted. He was pushing through the Nuremberg laws, and he was using the communist explosion of the Reichstag building as a way to persecute his political enemies. Hitler was well on his way to full power, but in order to show that he meant it and that he could control people through force and to purge his own ranks, he initiated the Night of the Long Knives, where over 1,000 different Nazi officers, members of the Brown Shirts, members of the SA were killed, including Roon. It's an extraordinary show of totalitarian force, not only totalitarian control over Germany, where he gets to kind of flex his authoritarian muscles, but also authoritarian control over the Nazi Party, over the National Socialist German Workers' Party. So that's what the Night of the Long Knives is. Rezgar says, long live, so I hope I answered that, Oliver. Rezgar asks, long live Kurdistan. Did you hear Kurdistan? Yes, I had somebody in channel asking about Kurdistan yesterday, and I said that the Kurds deserve their own state. Thank you. I'm glad you love my accent. That's very nice of you. Welcome, Rodolfo. It's good to see you. So I've got some amazing followers who follow me every step of the way. Rodolfo and Simon the Bunny are a few of them. And if you want to be one of those followers, all you have to do is like and subscribe and come back. And I'm usually good at recognizing people when they come here Saturdays at 6 and Sundays at 4 Eastern Standard Time. So yeah, I do have some Irish in me. That's a good catch. Am I prideful? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the timing. What pseudoscience am I saying? I think I gave the answer there. Thank you for subscribing. Something about British colonization about India. So yeah, the British take over India. I was going to talk about how the British got their rears beaten by the Americans and how that kind of surprised the world. And how the British Empire, with its large army and its success and its even more impressive navy, could be defeated by the Americans. But it actually has a little bit to do with India, so I'll do both at the same time. So usually with this, I have questions people ask and I try to answer them, but also people bring up topics that they're interested in. I have preset topics I'm interested in, and if I can get to them, I do them. I'm actually thinking of creating a third live stream where I actually just talk about social studies topics that are interesting to me. It's not a Q&A, and that might morph into a podcast eventually. Who knows? Anyways, so the British take over India in the 1700s. It's actually not the British government. It's the British East India Company. And they continue, and basically the way they colonize India is by pitting different Rajas, native Indian rulers, against each other. So that Mughal Empire that I mentioned earlier, the Empire of Taj Mahal, that Muslim empire that controlled India for centuries, was steadily in decline and had lost a lot of its influence. And many different warlords in India were kind of fighting against each other. So what the Europeans do when they show up, not only to trade, but also to start to colonize, the British East India Company, the Dutch, the French, they start to pit these different rival lords against each other. So the British will have their warlord, the French will have their warlord, and sometimes they'll just play off two warlords against each other for their own influence. So as time goes on, they're able to exert more and more influence and more control, and they're able to extract more and more goods from the Indians because they love their spices and they love the quick access to trading Chinese goods through India. That is why Columbus went to America in the first place. He was trying to get to India. That is why the Portuguese set up shop there, the Dutch, the French, and the British. So after a war called the 7 Years' War, which in my opinion is the First World War because they'd had fighting in India, Africa, the New World between the French, the British, and the Indian allies of the French, and Europe between Prussia, Russia, Austria, Britain, and France. So you've got fighting all over the world. What do you call that? A world war. But the 7 Years' War, part of it was fought in India. The British won that war and the French-Indian War and were able to take over larger parts of India and Canada. And there was a man named Robert Clive who was extremely successful at defeating the Indian forces, so much so that they called him Clive of India. And the British East India Company basically after that war held a hegemonic influence and control over India until the Sepoy Mutiny, where they were antagonizing Hindu and Muslim soldiers by lacing the barrels of their guns and their ammunition cells with pig fat. Sepoys were Indians who fought for the British. When I say Indians, I don't mean just Indians from India. I mean Indians from what is now Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, the Indian subcontinent. So the British East India Company antagonized them and were purposefully insulting them by rounding their ammunition shells and their firearms with pig fat, which is a disgrace and a violation of law, both in Hinduism and Islam. And these soldiers rebelled against the British East India Company, and the British government itself had to step in and put down the revolt. And from then on, the British government took over the running of India and became part of the British Empire. After India, the British East India Company kind of takes over India in the 1760s, however, the British actually start taxing their American colonies, which leads to the American Revolution, but they tax their Indian colonies much more. And they actually decided to create more colonies, such as Australia and New Zealand, because they're no longer, and South Africa, because they're no longer able to get taxes from the Americans. And so the British invest in going into Australia and going into the Sandwich Islands and New Zealand because they don't have that tax base in America, and they send all their prisoners to Australia, more or less. But they heavily tax the Indians far more than they tax the Americans. And basically, Britain has so many options for imperial growth that they really eventually, it seems like kind of a stupid thing to continue a war against the Americans over small rates of increase for taxes. The French and the Spanish have stepped in to help the Americans and undermine the British. So the British are wasting money, which they did in the 7 Years' War anyways, which is why they needed to tax in the first place. They're wasting money again fighting a war in the Americas when they can just let them go. So the British kind of just give up at Yorktown. And the Americans, with the help of the French and the Spanish, and with their own wherewithal and desire to be free over something so tedious as the British see it, as small tax increases, go free. The British never understood that the Americans wanted to be free, not because the rates of taxes were increased so small, but because the Americans did not have a say in Parliament. The British refused to give them a say in Parliament. That's what led to the Revolution. It wasn't because they were being taxed too much. It was because they were being taxed without being able to speak in Parliament. They were taxed regionally from colony to colony in each of the 13 colonies, but they were not taxed directly from Parliament until after the 7 Years' War. And that angst of being taxed without being able to represent themselves led to the American Revolution. And Britain basically says, fine, if you want to get your independence over such a tedious manner, then we'll let you go. So a little bit about India, a little bit about what topic I wanted to get to. How did the Americans overwhelm and surprise the British? So Adish asked about the colonization about India, and that's what I've got. Irish ancestry is very common, especially in the United States, Rodolfo, because there's a huge amount of Irish immigrants who moved to the United States. There's a huge amount of Irish people living in the British Isles. And of course, obviously, there's a huge amount of Irish people in Ireland. Also, something that happens in the British Empire is that people from different parts of Britain kind of settle to other parts of the colonies. So an example of this is a large amount of Irish people actually moved to the southern part of the American colonies. And so you have a large amount of Irish immigrants settling in the southern colonies in America. And so you have a Scottish doing the same thing. So these people move around, not just to immigrate to America, but they're doing this before the United States even exists. And you have Irish proliferating throughout the British Empire, not just in the British Isles and in America. So the British Empire is huge, and therefore that's why so many people around the globe speak English. That's why there's an English tradition in so many of these countries, and that's why there's a lot of Scottish and Irish and English people living there, or people with mixed backgrounds, half-breeds, biracial people, all of that. So, yes. Yes, I hope I answered your question, Oliver. I hope you were here to hear about the Night of the Long Knives. Hello, Mark. Welcome. Rodolfo's asking, did Lincoln have boyfriends? So this is this is an allegation that has simmered about Lincoln for a long time, that Lincoln was a homosexual. There is no evidence to say it. He did live with another man, and back in that day, it was not uncommon for men to sleep in the same bed. That could have created this was common throughout all of Europe and early American history. In the Middle Ages, men, particularly of high standing, royal men, held hands and exchanged kisses, usually on the cheek. Friendly greetings through kisses by people of the same sex have been common throughout the world. throughout world history, the classical world, the medieval world. It was not uncommon, and it was not uncommon in the medieval era for men to sleep in the same bed. This continued into the early modern period, into the colonial period, and into the early American period. And Lincoln did this not because he really wanted to, but because he was poor. So it is possible, it is not impossible, I should say, that he did have some homosexual experiences. I don't think that he did. I don't think there's any real evidence to prove it. A recent show came out showing him having an affair with a man. I don't know if that's true. It's historical speculation, and it's where myth mixes with fact. So, yeah, so Rodolfo, I don't think Lincoln had boyfriends. The president before him, James Buchanan, is a much more suitable candidate for America's first gay president. Buchanan was never married. He lived with a man who was well known for his flamboyance, who was actually the vice president of the president before him, William Rufus King. And so Buchanan never married. His niece actually took care of the White House, acting as the hostess because there was no first lady. And it's very possible, he is called the bachelor president. It's very possible that in his circles, homosexuality was common. So it's much more possible that James Buchanan, not Lincoln, was gay. Hello, welcome from Venezuela. I hope you're still here. That's really awesome. Hello, welcome. Thank you from Venezuela. I really appreciate that hug. And we have just reached, so did you guys all see that? Simon the Bunny has announced to the channel, and this is a huge moment for us, that we have just reached 5,000 subscribers. And thank you for you guys joining. If you like and subscribe, you are officially part of the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. You are officially a Friendly Neighborhood historian. You can now join, and I can say this with pride, the more than 5,000 people who have subscribed to this channel. The goal is 6,000 by the end of the year. That is our goal, and hopefully we'll be able to hit it. Oliver is now asking, can you explain the Spanish Civil War of 1936? Yes. So basically, there's a dictator in Spain in the late 20s and early 30s who dies and kind of, I forget his name, but he throws the country kind of into distress. There's a lot of movements for Republican and constitutional and democratic government in Spain. The king has lost a lot of his power. Spain has been a country in decline for centuries, basically kind of getting bullied by the other European powers since the early 1700s, especially the French. So the Spanish need a new government. People want more rights. They want more equality. Socialism has become quite popular amongst a group of people, ironically called the Republicans, who want a Republican government. They want a representative government. Some people want a constitutional monarchy. The Republicans want to they want to create a republic and get rid of the ancient monarchy of Spain. This doesn't fly well with a lot of people who are more nationalistic. And so you have the development of a Republican front that wants a socialist or semi-socialist government, and you have a development of a nationalist front, mainly led by the military, that wants to keep Spain as it always has been. That is supported by the church, because the church condemns socialism, because socialism is quite secular. Communism becomes influential. Stalin sends soldiers, influencers, aides, and spies into Spain to try to spread communism there. Meanwhile, the US and other Western countries such as Britain and France are interested in creating a new democracy, so they're actually on the side of the Republicans. So the Soviets, the Americans, the French, and the British are helping the Republican side throughout the war because they want to create some form of democratic government, be it communistic or be it free market. And the Spanish Civil War is kind of a crazy hodgepodge, and it's covered by Ernest Hemingway, who writes For Whom the Bell Tolls about it. There's been many movies and tales about the Spanish Civil War, but what's probably the best example in art of the Spanish Civil War is Pablo Picasso's mural Guernica, which shows the absolute, in his cubist form, it shows the absolute and utter destruction of the town of Guernica by bombs in, I think, 1937. And the war lasts 3 years. And the trigger of the war is that the nationalists seize power in Madrid or I think Barcelona, and they declare Francisco Franco, their main general, as the new leader of the Spanish state. Franco has promised to keep the king. He's promised to give concessions to the Catholic Church. He has also shown some interest in free markets, but he's also showed a lot of interest in fascism, and he's supported by Mussolini and Hitler, who think that a nice authoritarian government sandwiching France between Italy, Spain, and Germany, and between fascism and militarism would be really, really good. So Franco gets support on the nationalist side from Germany and Italy, while
the Republican rebels get support from the Americans, the French, and the British, and the communists in Russia. So it leads to this kind of chaotic thing. It's extremely bloody. It's extremely catastrophic, with war crimes committed by both sides, indiscriminate bombing of civilian lands, which I talked about yesterday was a thing well until after World War II. And eventually, finally, you get Franco is able to crush the rebels and take over the government, and he actually stays in power for 40 years. The first thing he does that's very wise, and he does this through his wisdom. I'm not saying he's a good guy. I'm saying he's shrewd. He's a brutal, repressive, totalitarian dictator. Maybe not as bad as a Mussolini. So far away from Stalin or Hitler in his cruelty, but repressive, authoritarian, anti-free speech. But sometimes he's able to adjust and open up markets, open up the government, open up elections, things like that throughout his tenure in order to keep the peace. He also is very good at appeasing the church. The first shrewd thing he does is he basically says Spain is going to stay out of World War II because we're still hurting. This was under a lot of pressure from Mussolini and Hitler to help the fascists, but he doesn't want to do that. He's friendly to them, he gives them some support, but he doesn't want to get explicitly involved in a war with Spain still suffering. The second shrewd thing he does is after the war is over, he all of a sudden flips and he's part of the Allies. The United States and Britain come to him and basically say, are you going to be a communist? Are you going to support communism? And he says no. And they said, will you support free markets? And he's like, sure. And they say, okay, you can stay in power. So Franco plays his cards very well. He's able to adjust the level of control he has over Spain, and that's why he's able to stay in power for 40 years. And this is similar in some ways to Juan Perón in Argentina. I would argue, historically speaking, and this is with no love for any of these people that I've just mentioned, that the fact that if Mussolini had done what Franco had and stayed out of World War II, he also would have lived a full, long life. And Franco died, I think, in his late 70s. And it was only after Franco died that Spain became a government and kind of just dissolved its monarchy, or at least took away the power of its monarchy. Italy dissolved its monarchy after Mussolini left. But yeah, so that's a quick story of the Spanish Civil War and how Franco was able to hold on to power for 40 years after his victory, despite being a fascist. So, thank you, MJ. I love that you're subscribed, and whatever homework topic you need help with, bring it up, and I will talk about it. Daniel, do you think that if Russia and Germany had no conflict during World War II, Germany would have went on to defeat the other nations? Great what-if question about history. This is a popular one. I think so. I think if you look at the map in 1941 and you look at the idea of Lebensraum, this idea of expansion at all costs and more space for the German peoples, there was really not much else of where Hitler would go without he couldn't really invade Britain. The British had proven too resilient. And of course, his huge ideological enemy is the communists. The Soviets didn't see it coming. They were thrown off, and he almost completely destroyed them. And it wasn't just the Russian winter, it was the Soviets' cruel tactics in running the Red Army, where they basically shot anyone who wouldn't. Did a draft, and they shot anyone who dodged the draft or ran away. That was able to help them defeat the Nazis. So, to answer your question, if Russia and Germany had no conflict and had kept their non-aggression pact, where they had split Poland at the beginning of World War II, then yes, I think Germany would have won. But I think it made a lot of sense for Hitler to invade with Operation Barbarossa, and I think it looked like a slam dunk for him and for the Nazis. And it almost was. It was very, very close. It's not history is hindsight's 2020, but it looked like the Nazis weren't going to have a problem taking Leningrad, which was St. Petersburg, and Stalingrad. And if they had done that, they would have won. So that's a really, really great question. But yeah, hope that answers you. Yeah, MJ, if you don't have a question, just sit back and enjoy. And if you ever come up with a question or a topic, it's not just asking a particular question. It's, do you have a topic you want to learn more about? I'll talk about it. Somebody did that by asking about the Spanish Civil War. And if you're just joining us, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, our second part of our weekly Q&A every Saturday and Sunday. We're here Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern and Sundays 4 p.m. Eastern. If you like learning about social studies and sciences, drop a topic in or a comment or a question in the chat. Like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. I was trying to reach 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Then I was trying to reach it by the end of the month. But thanks to all of you, I have reached it with this Q&A still going on. So I've reached it by the end of the day, basically. So I really appreciate that. And now the goal is 6,000 by the end of the year. So we'll see if we can get there. But yeah, like, subscribe. And check out my daily content. I have daily short form content, daily history videos, rest in peace videos about historical figures, daily biographies about historical figures, and different topics such as historical myths, historical memes, fun stuff like that. So yeah, check out the content on the channel, and there are several long length videos. I'm trying to do more and more of those. Let me see here. Hola, welcome. Thank you for joining us, Cody. Yeah, I love having nerds here. Thank you. Welcome, nerds. And history nerds is what we've got. And Tammy, I believe you were here yesterday, so it's good to see you again. Thank you for returning. Okay. Thank you for coming, Rodolfo. Really appreciate it. Hello, Jade. Welcome. Can you explain about Idi Amin? I don't know a huge amount about Idi Amin. Obviously, we know him as the genocidal dictator in, I believe it was Rwanda. I might be getting it confused. I might be getting the two events confused. I really don't want to. I'm trying to think of I know about the Entebbe raid and how his government was overthrown. He was a brutal dictator known for his repression. I don't think he's the one who did the Rwandan genocide. I might be wrong about that. Basically, when Africa gains its independence, when African countries gained their independence from the Europeans in the middle of the 20th century, the issue that they have to deal with is these power vacuums. There's a lot of wealth, there's a lot of economic opportunities, and there's a lot of political ideologies that they can subscribe to. And some of them, you have militaries that want to control the governments and set up semi-authoritarian states, and that's what Amin did, I believe, in Rwanda. I might be butchering that, because I might be getting the Rwandan genocide and Uganda's dictatorship confused. But I do that on the channel. I get things confused. I did a video once about the 1936 Munich Olympics, where Hitler showed off all of his Aryan pride, only to be thwarted by Jesse Owens and the Americans. Of course, those were the Berlin Olympics, and the Munich Olympics are the 1972 Olympics, where Palestinian terrorists took hostage members of the Israeli team and killed 8 of them. So, was Mussolini Hank? I don't know what you mean by that. Oliver is asking, can you explain the last days of Germany 1945? That's another great question. Thank you, Oliver. You're asking some fire ones today. So here's the thing with the last days of Germany. So basically, the Allies allow the Soviets to go in through the east, and they brutalize the Eastern Europeans and German population. Hitler and other Nazi leaders kill themselves or try to escape. Some of them do escape, like Adolf Eichmann and Joseph Mengele. Mengele will die an old man despite all of the atrocities he committed and just awful, quirky scientific experiments that are almost unspeakable on Jews in the camps. Eichmann, who was a mass murderer, also escapes only to be hunted down by Israel, and many of them escape to South America. So in the last days of Germany in 1945, you see this collapse of a Nazi system. You see them basically being surrounded. Their efforts at the Battle of the Bulge to push into the American lines failed. And so they are surrounded, and basically everything kind of falls apart. Hitler takes cyanide with his now wife, Eva Braun, who had been his lover for years. Then he shoots himself. So there are several Nazis who try to escape. Some of them are taken back by the Americans and the Soviets because both sides are interested in utilizing the Nazi technology, especially militarily, for their own futures and for the burgeoning Cold War. So there's a little bit about the last days there. What history do you know? I hope you've been listening because I think I know it quite a bit. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining this. Yeah, Oliver, that's a historical myth that Lenin wanted Trotsky to succeed him and Stalin kind of stole it. That's kind of the George Orwell Animal Farm, which is a great book, but inaccurate in that sense. Lenin did not want a successor. Lenin did not trust Trotsky or Stalin. Lenin thought that Trotsky and Stalin were both dangerous to the cause, and he believed that a committee should run the Bolshevik government and run the Union of Socialist Soviet Republics, the USSR. So basically, the way it works is Stalin was not considered a forerunner at the forefront. He wasn't considered an intellectual. He wasn't considered intelligent. He wasn't considered a leader of the revolution. Those were men like Zinoviev, Lev Kamenev, Leon Trotsky, and Nikolai Bukharin. He wasn't considered an excellent Marxist theorist or an intellectual. He was seen more as kind of a brute and a bully. Uh, didn't matter how devoted he was to Marxist-Leninism, but which he was extremely devoted to it. All that mattered was that he wasn't seen as a preeminent threat in the party to succeed Lenin, and no one could have seen that coming in 1920. But the thing that Stalin does, he is the general secretary of the party. And as the general secretary, he is able to organize party membership. He's able to organize party events, committees, things like that. So he's able to pass out political favors and start to create a bureaucracy. This bureaucracy is loyal to him. These people, their membership and standing and high preeminence in the Communist Party relies on Stalin. And Stalin uses this as his means to gain more and more influence. And as he gains more and more influence, more and more of these committee meetings, more and more people are saying what he wants them to say. Although these people will probably later be hunted down and killed for not being loyal enough to him during his infamous purges of the late 1930s. But Stalin uses them to gain power, and by the late 20s, he's able to push out Bukharin and Trotsky is exiled and later hunted down and killed by Stalin's guards when he was living in Mexico. So Stalin's rise to power comes from basically nowhere. It's very surprising, but it's basically how he used political organization and intimidation and his own wherewithal and boldness to usurp people who were probably smarter than him. But at the end of the day, he had the last laugh. So, no, I think Hitler died. I've heard that he secretly survived. There were definitely Nazis who secretly and not so secretly survived. Operation Paperclip was where Americans brought Nazi scientists and researchers to the United States. Werner von Braun is the best example. He created the V-2 rocket. Nazi scientists basically got free immunity despite all of the horrible things they believed and did in order to help the Americans with their space program. And the Soviets did the same thing. I'm trying to remember the name of their operation. But both sides fighting against each other in the Cold War used Nazi technology and Nazi scientists to help them. I love history too. I'm so glad you're here. You're in the right place. A super soldier. Not quite. Thank you. I'm glad you're subscribing. You are now part of more than 5,000 friendly neighborhood historians. And to become a friendly neighborhood historian, you don't have to drop on Patreon. You don't have to follow me on social media, although you're more than welcome to. And my handles are pretty much what they've got here. Maybe we can put those in the chat. But all you have to do is like and subscribe, and that makes you a friendly neighborhood historian. And check out some of the short form and long form content I have on the channel. No, I don't believe that's true that Hitler sent someone to the Eastern Front for a joke. I don't know much about Haitian dictators, Papa Doc. I've heard the name. I would have to read a little bit more. Haiti has had a lot of dictators and a lot of upheaval ever since Toussaint Louverture's overthrow of the French government in the early 1800s. There's been this desire for despotism in Haiti by the Haitians. And Daniel's asking, in your opinion, which empire dynasty, but I want to learn more about Papa Doc, so I'll look into it. But Daniel's asking, in your opinion, which empire dynasty was the most successful and powerful? Ooh, that's tough. I think the gold standard is the Romans because they last so long. The Roman Empire lasts about 500 years, and that's only if you're considering the Western half. If you consider the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire Roman, which they certainly did, despite the fact that they were more culturally Greek, then the Byzantine Empire is the Roman Empire, then that means the Roman Empire lasts for 1,500 years. I think when it comes to length, standard, strength, power, there's just something in the West with the Romans. I think the Romans have the longest. I think China, obviously, is a long-lasting empire. The Han Dynasty is a great example. The Mongol is the largest contiguous land empire, but they don't last as long. They have to divide up because they're so darn big. The British Empire is huge and expansive, but they don't last nearly as long, and they're far less of an empire in certain ways. So in my opinion, I'd have to go with the Romans, but it's almost by default because you look at the Russian Empire, you look at the British Empire, you look at the French empires, the European empires of the late 19th century are far more richer and far more powerful. I also think that some love needs to be given to the African empires, like the Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. Mali obviously being the Mansa Musa Empire, the rich and one of the richest empires in human history, a huge center, creating huge cities like Timbuktu, which were centers of learning as well as trade, being extremely powerful and spreading not through the sword but through trade. I think they deserve a lot of credit. The Mughal are really powerful in India, and I think that the early Islamic caliphates, particularly the Abbasids, are an Islamic empire that no one should blink at, as well as the Ottomans. So those are just a few that I think deserve an honorable mention or need to be on a list of, maybe I can do a tier list or something. People have asked for tier list. Okay, so Simon's did some fact checking. Edie was not directly into the Rwandan genocide, but yes. So I got him confused. So the Rwandan genocide is in the 90s between the Hutsis and the Tutsis, and he was the dictator of Uganda in the 1970s. Yes, and just real kind of feeds into that whole thing, but I mean, really repressive, really brutal, rumored to be a cannibal. Yeah, so that's Simon. Thank you for helping me out there, because I got those two things confused. I get things wrong all the time, and you guys help me. So Daniel, most powerful empire, I have to go with the Romans, just because of longevity mixed with all the other factors. And Simon, yes, Idi Amin was in fact the dictator of Uganda in the 1970s until he was overthrown. Jade, why did Albert Einstein reject the offer of presidency of Israel? Einstein wasn't interested in politics. Great people throughout history have one thing in common. They know what they don't know. And Einstein knew he wasn't a politician. Yes. So we are getting near the end, as Simon is pointing out. I will do my best to answer as much of him as I can, but let's see here. Please like and subscribe. Absolutely. I need to watch that. I've heard interesting things about it. There's definitely this power vacuum, and again, nobody expects Khrushchev to take over after Stalin. It seems like Molotov will be the next guy, but it ends up being Khrushchev to everyone's surprise, because he's kind of just the moderate choice. He's almost a dark horse. And then Oliver is asking, it's true they sent Hosinger to the Eastern Front. Interesting. I'll have to look into that, Oliver. Thank you for bringing that up. Luftwaffen. People believe Papa Doc was like a voodoo spirit. Yes, so definitely voodoo and different acculturate practices that mix. The voodoo religion is a mix of African traditions, Indian traditions, and Roman Catholicism. And there's definitely a lot of superstition in that religion. And so it's not surprising that a ruler like Papa Doc would use voodoo as a way to control the people, especially a superstitious religion. And can I explain the fall of the USSR? No, Hearts of Iron is not realistic. I think when it comes to who's the worst in the Nazi Party, I think that Mengele, just what he does to human beings, Eichmann's and Himmler's indiscriminate killing, I don't want to say anyone is worse or better than the Nazis. I think they're all just awful human beings. And Himmler was absolutely terrible. Even Goebbels, even Goering, these men had no conscience. They were totally immoral and totally sold out to power. So yeah, it's a good game. Bhagat Singh. I'm trying to remember what exactly that is. I don't know off the top of my head. It sounds extraordinarily familiar. If I'm correct, is that the movement that began in the 1930s? You'll have to tell me, Jade. Can I explain the fall of the USSR? Yes, I'll do it very quickly because we're about to wrap up. Basically, the USSR's economic system couldn't keep up with the American system. The military could, but basically the United States basically pumps up a bunch of economic and military spending in the 1980s. And the Soviets can't keep up with this. Their own satellite countries are trying to get their own independence because they're chafing. The communist system isn't really working, and although no one thought about it, once again, you have this, nobody expected this at the beginning of the decade, the 1980s. By the end of the decade, the Soviets are on their last legs. So I'd have to go into more detail when we have more time. I'm going to wrap up today. We went an hour and 40 minutes yesterday, and somehow, despite huffing and puffing my way through the first 10 minutes, we were able to get to an hour today. So if you liked what I've talked about, if you've enjoyed it, like and subscribe. We'll be back next Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Check out the content, though. It's dropping daily. And if you are just joining us, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where I talk about history and different things like that, social studies, and it's a Q&A. And I'll check that out. Thank you very much, Oliver, and I hope you enjoyed everything. Thank you for your great questions. Daniel, some great questions. If anyone I will take one more question, my last call. One more question in the chat, and then I will bid you all adieu. So, hello, welcome. Oh, good to see you. Long time no see, Ningun. Yeah. If anyone had, I'm going to give it up for one last question. If anyone wants to bring that up, and I will, and then we will close it down. Was Einstein grew up in Rio? I don't know. I've never heard of that before, actually. Yeah. Okay. All right then. So if no one has any more questions, thank you for coming. I'll have to look into that then. Oh, the killing squads. Yes. Yeah, they were real. And actually, the reason in the Holocaust that the Nazis start to use gas chambers is a cleaner for them to kill the Jews. No, I don't. Who killed JFK? Robert Kennedy Jr. believes it's the CIA. A lot of people have rumors. The Warren Commission, historically speaking, found that it was a lone gunman, but there are a lot of conspiracy theories about that, and a lot of people thinking that it would be impossible for Oswald to kill Kennedy. So, who is worse, the Japanese or the Reich? I think the Japanese were awful in World War II, and not a lot of people talk about that. And I think the Americans and the British did some bad things, and the Soviets were terrible as well. But I think that the systematic destruction of 11 million lives, I think the Nazis were far worse. And the Japan attack on Korea. So Japan actually takes over Korea in the 1890s and adds it to their sphere of influence, and they're there long before they get to China during World War II, where they fight for a long time. And is the moon landing real? Yes, it is real. I don't have all the evidence in my book to go over that right now, but it is. I've heard a lot of arguments. I know the conspiracy theories. None of them make any sense at the end of the day. But anyways, and Chernobyl, 1986, Ukrainian nuclear power plant meltdown, actually exposed the holes in the Soviet system and how inefficient they were at running things, helped bring down the Soviet Union, absolutely devastating to the entire region. It's still not habitable, or even by plant life. And Bush did not do 9/11. All right, and on that very strange note, I will see you guys next Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern. If you like this, be sure to subscribe, join the channel, and you are officially a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. Follow me on my social media handles. They're all kind of a Friendly Neighborhood history. And check out my content. It's dropping daily, my short content, and my full-length video tomorrow on Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. Would love it if you guys check that out. I will see you guys next Saturday at 6 and then Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So, all right, take care. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I wish I could give you more evidence, Riley. We're at the end of the chat, but if you come back, let's talk about that next week, and I'll look into it a little bit more, and I will address it and why those conspiracy theories exist, because for me, that's even more fascinating than the theories themselves. Thank you. Take care. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you next Saturday. Peace, everybody.